Welcome back to McNulty's Book Corral. This is exactly what you think it is. It is the long-awaited Jim Harrison episode. I have mentioned Jim Harrison and his many fine books numerous times on this channel. I had neglected to get to him, so today I'm going to do at least a brief introduction for those of you who are unfamiliar with his work, and that's really the purpose here. For those of you already familiar with his work, I'm not going to say anything revelatory or interesting, maybe, but for those of you who are out there who have not read his novels, that is what we're doing now. Jim Harrison was born in 1937 and he died in 2016. I had the great pleasure of meeting him quite a long time ago. In fact, I can look it up. I met him, I can tell you exactly the date I met him. I met him in 1994 on the 10th of May at Barber's Bookstore at 1350 North Wells Street in Chicago, Illinois. I've not been to Barber's Bookstore in a long time. I believe that is still there. It should be. It was great. I spent $23.87 on some books. This was the book that had been released, which inspired that event where he came to talk and signed copies of the book. And he signed this book for me. I'll have a scan of his signature coming up. He signed multiple books for me that day. He signed The Woman Lit by Fireflies for me, and he also signed one of my favorites. This is a nonfiction work, Just Before Dark, which was a collection of his essays for Esquire magazine. He wrote for Esquire magazine for many years. I subscribed to Esquire simply because he wrote for Esquire. It was not, nor is it now, a great magazine. And he signed this as well. I guess I can show you this one, so you can see that. That doesn't really come up very good on there. Anyways, I met him. I have some photos that I took that were taken of him, and we'll take a look at those. I have a couple of these coming up. He spoke for well over an hour, and my friend Nick and I attended the event, and we regretfully forgot to bring a tape recorder with us. Back in those days, in the early to mid-90s, Nick and I would haul around a tape recorder that he had and record things. I took it with me to Tennessee once on an airplane. What was it, a Wollstonecraft big tape recorder? And I took it down to Tennessee when I interviewed and met Sheb Woolley at his office, and I also videotaped that. So anyways, we used to record stuff, and we forgot to do it. He spoke for an hour. It was fascinating to listen to him. When I met him, I don't remember what I said, something about I didn't have anything profound to say, and he said he responded in kind. He didn't have anything either. I don't remember the exact words that we exchanged. I do have it written down. And he was great, My impression of him one-on-one was that he was a very kind and humble man. Now, he studied Zen Buddhism and Zen Satori, enlightenment and so forth, and he communicated and was friends with Gary Snyder, the great poet, and the Beat Generation writers and so forth. So I had been interested in meeting him for some time. It is the only time I met him, and it was all too brief. So I had him sign some books and observed him speaking. I hope somebody somewhere has a recording of that at Barber's Bookstore back in 1994. That would be cool if that ever came to light. So Jim Harrison, awesome dude. So I wanted to talk to you in very general terms. I have a stack of his books here in poetry, on how I got involved in reading Jim Harrison. And like most people, it was Legends of the Fall. And I have over here, that's right, Legends of the Fall, the poster, from the dollar bin or whatever. I don't know if I can get this propped up here. Probably not. I won't be able to do that. But Legends of the Fall was made in the 1990s, and it is a film that the people that I talked to that liked Jim Harrison's book, and they certainly liked the novella. This is 3 novellas. They don't like the movie. I think the movie is one of the best films of the 90s. I consider it a classic. I think it's one of Brad Pitt's best films, along with River Runs Through It and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Those are Brad Pitt's 3 best films. I like the film. I thought it was true in spirit to the novella about the 3 brothers in World War I. The other novellas in this book are Revenge, which was made into a film starring Kevin Costner. That is also a good film. And The Man Who Gave Up His Name. Legends of the Fall is the 3rd and final novella in this book. And it turned me on. Look at this photo of him on the back with his daughter. It turned me on to Jim Harrison. This was not his first book. It was the first book I read. And my first impression of Jim Harrison was both meeting him and reading him by this time in the 90s was that he was very much like Hemingway. Of course, he has connections too, the Michigan connection, and his cabin in Michigan, and the hunting and fishing and hiking in the Michigan woods, not unlike Hemingway. In fact, I believe his cabin wasn't all that far from Big Two-Hearted River. I'd have to look that up. Don't hold me to that. In any event, I thought that the connection to Hemingway was clear as far as his masculinity, the manner in which he wrote. Now, he did not write like Hemingway. It was the persona that was like Hemingway, And Jim Harrison covered a lot of territory. I took some notes on this because I didn't, I'm trying to do justice for those of you that haven't read him. He's a masculine writer. There are very few masculine writers out there right now. I'm probably wrong about that. If there are, they're not in the national. They're not in the national focus. Okay, Harrison became quite famous. He was friends with Tom McGuane, Jimmy Buffett, so many others. Gary Snyder, the Beats, the ones that were alive that I've talked about, and so forth and so on. I saw a picture of him with Gary Snyder. He spent some time with Gary Snyder. I knew some of those guys too, and so forth. His themes are family conflict, coming of age, sexual liberation and sexual obsession. There was always a setting of Michigan, sometimes elsewhere, and life, death, love, and hate, and so forth. Legends of the Fall is about the 3 brothers and their family history. It's a really moving novella. You need to read it if you haven't. So I'm just going to cover a couple of books that I read in order of my reading them. So these are not his first book was Wolf, which was also made into, I believe, a movie with Jack Nicholson. And he wrote the screenplay for that. And I didn't care for that at all. It wasn't anything like the book. My next book that I read by him was A Good Day to Die. And A Good Day to Die, this is about having epiphanies, which is an understanding of the time and place with people, and it's an unlikely trio, a poet and a rebel, and very much a 60s feel to A Good Day to Die. It's a good book. It's not, I didn't think it was a great book, but I liked it. So I'm continuing now my interest in Jim Harrison. So I read Legends of the Fall and Good Day to Die. Then I read Farmer. Farmer is a book that really still sticks with me. And this is about a farmer who has an epiphany, who has an understanding, an enlightened moment. Not necessarily in biblical terms, but he's seeking more experience in his life as he ages. And there's some wonderful scenes in here that I thought really captured the essence of Jim Harrison's writing. I strongly encourage you to pick out Farmer. People don't look at Farmer. He had books that were far more famous than this, than A Good Day to Die and Farmer. There's many others. I'll cover some of them. And I liked Farmer a lot. Legends of the Fall, A Good Day to Die, and Farmer. I'm now a regular reader of Jim Harrison, trying to get his books. So then I read a book that I'm going to reread this winter, and that's Sundog, which was published. When was this published? This was published in 1984. And it's, here it is. I have scans of the covers coming up. Sundog is, I'm just going to read the back to you because the back explains the book, and I think it gives you a real flavor of Jim Harrison. In the wilds of Michigan's Upper Peninsula, Robert Corvus Strang is crawling through the woods. A beautiful Costa Rican woman is dancing in a string bikini, and a dissipated writer is trying to stay on his feet. All three have retreated to this isolated land, where Strang, builder of dams and bridges, preacher of gospels, lover of women, explorer of limits, launches into the story of his monumental life. In a novel that stretches from Michigan to Africa and the Amazon, Strang leads his listeners across rivers of time, through the nature of innocence, politics, and desire, to a final and stunning defiance of life's frailty. Boy, I couldn't think of a better blurb for brief synopsis of a book than that. A lot of times you get this kind of hand-me-down phrases that publishers use to describe the summary of a book, but this one is really on target. Again, I'm so fond of this book. It is rarely mentioned as one of his best books, and I think it is. This one, I'm really hooked into Jim Harrison. I read this and I thought, this man is a real writer. This is the real deal. This, my friends, is what writing is all about. Is Sundog, one of the great books of our age. So I'm into it now, okay? I'm really deeply involved in reading it. Then I read Dalva. Dalva was published, I think Dalva was published before Sundog, actually. It was 88. Dalva is the story of a Native American woman who's looking for her son, and she starts exploring her family history through some journals that are left to her that date back to the Civil War and Wounded Knee. This was a major bestseller for Jim Harrison. This really solidified his career, in my humble opinion. This is another masterpiece. If you'd have to only read two books by Jim Harrison, Dalva and Sundog would be my choice. I'm going to reread Sundog this winter. I've read Dalva several times. It's such an incredible book. Really, just fantastic writing. And you get really caught up in Dalva's story. She's a magnificent woman. He really got into her character and her life. Just fantastic. Most people consider this to be Harrison's masterpiece. Okay, I think he wrote numerous masterpieces. I'll give you that. There's a masterpiece right there. That is a masterpiece of American literature. Recent books, I have a stack here of everything. I enjoyed The Ancient Minstrel and The River Swimmer. These are novellas. Again, Harrison was known for writing novellas. He loved the short form, as well as for writing poetry. We'll get to that in a moment. These later works I thought were very good. I really enjoyed The River Swimmer. I think there were only two novellas in The River Swimmer. Yeah, The Land of Unlikeness and The River Swimmer. The River Swimmer is typical, fantastic Jim Harrison. There's a lot to discover with Jim Harrison for those of you who have not read him. I think it's incredible. I showed you the one work of nonfiction, which is Just Before Dark. He had many others. Here's off to the side. My wife bought this for me, and here's a really old picture of Jim Harrison on the back. Always seeking. Jim Harrison is also very well known for his poetry. He has numerous poems out there, and I wanted to get these editions, and I'm sorry, I should have been better prepared to grab books. Selected and New Poems start here if you're going to read Jim Harrison's poetry. Really accessible stuff. If you're familiar with Ted Kooser and Robert Bly and any of those, you'll tap right into Jim Harrison and love his poetry. He has many other poetry books. In Search of Small Gods, and I'm just going to show, I don't have scans here, The Theory and Practice of Rivers and New Poems. This is a very well-received collection, and I love them. I should have scanned this. Look at that picture of him on the back. He didn't age well. Songs of Unreason, and what do we have here? We have Saving Daylight. Here's a very Hemingway-esque photo of him on the back of this collection. of poetry. He was incredible. His last book was Dead Man's Float, which was a collection, and you can see how he aged rather, well, let's just say in a rugged manner. You know, and that happens. Hard to believe. I used to be good looking too, but you know, age catches up with you. Caught up with Jim Harrison a little more than some of us. But he was great. I actually love this photo because there's so much character in his expression. What a man. You know, I wish I had spent time with him because he was so cool. This is the re-release of this book that came out, and then after he died, they put in it his last poem. He died at his writing desk, and this is what he was writing. This is the actual copy of his handwritten poem, which is clearly unfinished, and then they transcribed it here for you, so you get the last thing he was writing at the time of his passing. Fantastic, just fantastic collections of poetry. There are many other books. The Beast That God Forgot to Invent. I mean, I liked everything. The Farmer's Daughter is a great one too, and it's not what you think. Okay, The Great Leader, The Road Home is another long novel. So he wrote a lot of novellas and novels. Earlier books, Warlock and Wolf were his early novels. Again, Wolf I think was his first book, and I like the book. I don't like the movie with Jack Nicholson. Jack Nicholson was a friend of his. Those are famous stories. And then the major work would be Brown Dog, and so forth. So forth and so on. So there's a lot of material here, and there's others. So much material to choose from in the literary community with authors I know that some of you haven't read. And I like to cover those in general terms because I am well aware of the fact that in my audience there are people who are homebound. And I'm not going to tell you how I know that or who they are. Take my word at it, please. That people who are homebound, who they can't really buy books, so they rely on the library, which is fantastic. And they can't travel. They can't even afford television, so they use these little square things. You're looking at me through a little square image from a cell phone, and most people watch YouTube on their cell phones. This is their way out of the chair, if they're bedridden or if they're handicapped in any way. They do this, and they can get through their families and friends books from the library to read. And I like to cover different authors for those of you that are in that position, because I am acutely aware that you're there. You know who you are, and I thank you for watching. So for those of you that are in that position and you need something different to read, men and women alike, Jim Harrison is there for you. I hope that you find him interesting when you read him, if you can get something from the library. His poetry, of course, and his novels and novellas are worth your time. So I think I've said enough. I do hope I've done the great Jim Harrison justice, at least in this brief little introduction. And for the rest of you, thank you if you've checked in. Thank you for checking in. Stay well, stay happy. Feed your brain. Read a book.